Hello, it's me, Sam Baker. And before we go on with the show, I want to tell you about an exciting new initiative coming from The Shift. Many of you have asked how you can support the podcast further and get more Shift into the bargain. Well, now you have the opportunity to do just that by joining the Shift community. You can go to steady.media/The Shift and become a member of The Shift. In return for supporting the podcast, you'll receive exclusive weekly newsletters, community membership, and plenty of other perks aimed at bringing us all closer together. That's steady.media/The Shift. Hello and welcome to The Shift, the podcast that aims to tell the no-holds-barred truth about being a woman post-40. Created and hosted by me, writer and broadcaster, Sam Baker. Who hasn't looked at those things you should have done by the time you're 30, 40, 50 lists and rolled their eyes? And yet, consciously or not, many of us still live our lives according to those really arbitrary timelines. But what does middle age feel like if you've been acing those lists since you were 16 and then suddenly you're not? Today's guest, Emma Forrest, was an early achiever. She had a newspaper column by the age of 16, had written 3 novels by 30, and then moved to Hollywood and became a screenwriter. There, she seemingly had it all. Job, famous husband, fabulous house, beautiful daughter, and then she didn't. So how does it feel to be hitting 40 and walking away from the dream? Swapping the LA mansion for an attic flat in North London and an ostensibly glamorous marriage for a relationship with yourself?
It's not made up. It is true that a woman, as they come into their 40s, is coming into their peak sex drive and their sexual power, and it's a different kind of sex if you're not driving towards a permanent relationship. Like, you can have a permanent relationship, but you don't need it for reasons of procreation. It's just, you're free to come at it from a different angle.
Emma joined me to talk about her new memoir, Busy Being Free, and how she freed herself from a lifelong obsession with romantic attachment. Rediscovering yourself in your 40s, why women who choose to be alone unnerve people, and what an enfant terrible looks like at 45. I should warn you, there's also discussion of eating disorders, cutting, and suicide. Thanks for coming on The Shift, Emma. I'm just going to go straight in. Like, practically the first sentence of the book, after the prologue, is the school mum saying, "How did this happen to you?" Like, wow, kick me in the guts, why don't you?
Yeah. I mean, I actually am really, really lucky that the parents in the class are awesome, because you know how most people's primary wound is like first heartbreak. Mine really is school bullying, because a weird thing about it is it was also the parents. I just had a bad luck class where
the parents bullied you.
The parents would say, yeah, it was very, very odd. So my grandfather was an immigrant whose great gift to us was that we should get to go to private school, and he paid for it, and that was not good. That was not good. And just by bad luck, I was in a class with quite a lot of anti-Semitic bullying. And what you know, if it's 8-year-olds, is that they've heard that from their parents, because how could they begin to...
Yeah, that's totally where they've got it from.
Yeah, so that is the primary wound. It's like 8-year-olds going, "Don't you feel bad that you killed Christ?" I'm like, I don't understand what you're talking about, and neither do you.
What?
Right.
What kind of 8-year-old just comes out with that?
Want to hear it from their parents. So
Jesus Christ.
all that is the primary thing, I think, and any good review or adulation or handsome boyfriend I've ever had is a F you to stuff that happened when I was 8. It's so sad. But there you go.
But I was struck by so many things through the book, but there was one thing when you're talking about middle age and you're talking about how, so much of what you do is about that proving people wrong, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about proving, like, the people who said you were X at 5, at 10. So literally with you starting with 8 and all the way through the people who said you couldn't do stuff, or the person who said you were that kind of thing. Yeah. And you're still fighting those battles right up into your 40s and beyond.
If anything, I think you get greater clarity on it, like going, I'm right to carry that as my primary wound, or I'm right to be upset about that. And I sometimes think if I ever got it together to make a podcast, I would call it, "Why Did You Hate Me?" And you'd get to go back. You'd get to go back to childhood and really examine with the person, because it is quite weird when you think through your life in childhood, in teens, in 20s, in 30s, of those moments you're like, oh, that person doesn't like me.
Yeah.
And it's like really visceral.
It's like when you're more grown up and people kind of say in that kind of really balanced way, oh, you know, well, not everybody can like you. It's just one of those things. And they particularly say it about the internet. But I still don't think I'm very well adjusted about that.
I think I talk about this in the book, and I certainly laugh about it in my head a lot, is that I always say my self-esteem problem is that my mother gave me too high self-esteem. Like,
yeah, what do you mean by that? Because I read that a couple of times and I thought, what even is too high self-esteem?
I just mean that the first time I liked a guy who didn't like me back, I couldn't even process it. And my mum had to explain to me that the people I was attracted to wouldn't always be attracted to me back. And I was like, but then why did you say I was the best in the school play? And why did you say I was the most I remember standing up in the bath to get out when I was about 12, climbing out of the bath, seeing myself in the mirror, and it actually filling me with cold dread for the first time that my mother might not be right, that I was the most perfect girl in the world. Like, what if I was only the 9th most perfect person in the world? So yeah, that got knocked out of me, you know, by men with emergent sexuality, unfortunately.
God, it's so weird, isn't it? It's like, it's a bit like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, isn't it? Because it's like, number of people I know who would say, oh, I wish that my parents had made me feel better about myself. And then it's almost like you've had the reverse and it didn't work either. Yeah,
I do think it sort of blew my mind, and to some extent continues to blow my mind when you realise as a woman you're meant to feel grateful for a man being attracted to you.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why it can be so hard to figure out what you're into, what turns you on, because as a young woman you're so caught up in gratitude for them wanting you.
It's such a weird thing, isn't it? Because I actually wrote down when I was making notes, I mean, I actually went out with my first boyfriend because he fancied me. Yeah. He hadn't even crossed my... I mean, I was like you can imagine, a ginger kind of swotty kid. If I'd thought about it, it wouldn't have occurred to me that he would have fancied me. But I only went out with him because he fancied me. You know, it was not anything to do with whether or not I fancied him.
I kind of think women do that till 27. That's the age when
27.
Well, that's the whole Saturn's return. You know, do you know about that?
No, go for it.
Well, actually, the Greatest No Doubt album is Saturn's Return, when Gwen Stefani was turning 27 and was wrestling with, like most 27-year-old women, like, what are you actually into? Do you want to do that? Are you doing that for approval? It's your first time that your life is coming back on itself if you believe in astrology, which my take on astrology, for what it's worth, is that possibly it's nonsense, but anything that enough people believe in does hold an energetic power. So yeah, 27 is really interesting because it's when a lot of women made it. Like, it's when Cameron Diaz became a star. It's when Debbie Harry became a star. It's interesting. Yeah.
It's really interesting.
But it's definitely, for me, the first time I was able to grapple with, do I want to sleep with that person?
Yeah, or am I just doing it because he wants it?
Yeah.
So interesting, isn't it? I mean, one of the things that I've found is that many women, I mean, maybe it's a third cycle or something, but many of the women I speak to don't even reach that point until they're into their 40s, until they're around about, you know, what are you, 42?
No, I'm 45 now. 45. Yeah, 42 when I started writing.
Around about your age then. But before we go on to that, I wanted to talk about that comment that school mum made, because after I kind of went, oh my God, that's rude. Afterwards, I thought, I kind of see where she's coming from, because if it can happen to you, you know, like you've been massively successful since the age of 60 from outside. You're making,
I'm making a face. Sorry, go on.
You're making a face. I know. And everybody, I've got to say, it doesn't matter how successful you are. Everybody makes that face when you describe them as successful. But from outside, you've been massively successful, and you kind of, you know, you had it all. You had the husband and the house and the career and the kids and all those things that we're meant to want and meant to strive for. And on the timeline, you were kind of like right there. You ticked all the boxes. If it can happen to you, what hope is there for the rest of us? I guess is what she was saying.
That's very generous of her of you. Yeah, I think I think also because I was coming to London from California, for a lot of good reasons, remains sort of a dreaming board for people in Europe. You know, in London, it does still seem like sort of a wormhole or a portal. There's like a magic and a mystery to it. So I feel like if I had been returning to London from like Berlin, maybe she wouldn't have felt that same way. You know?
Yeah, you weren't coming to London from a mansion in the Hollywood Hills.
Yeah, it's like you're coming back into black and white having been in Oz, you know.
But can you tell us a little bit, I mean, not too much, because obviously it's what the book's about, but just a tiny bit about what that process was that led up to that change, that decision, if you like.
Yeah, well, it's peculiar and it's not peculiar. It's that I filed for divorce pretty much the same week, if not the same month that Trump was elected to office. I was living in America. I've been living there a long time, and I just turned 40, and I thought that's really interesting that the most powerful man in the world is also probably one of the worst men in the world, and someone who is famous, amongst other things, for his visceral disgust at middle-aged women. And so he became, I've told my ex-husband this, he became very much entwined with my ex-husband in my head. I always felt...
yuck.
Yeah, no, but I felt like my ex sort of was like, if Trump were talented and handsome and had charm, he's like a bizarro good... He was like a bizarro good reflection of him in my mind, because my ex-husband has a short fuse and you know, is a very eccentric, unusual, massive character. And certainly in the bleak parts of divorce, I felt haunted by Trump. I felt haunted by this person who consistently has to say out loud how disgusting he thinks middle-aged women are. And I also, you know, on a really base level, felt I needed to be near my family who were in London. So that's how I ended up coming back to what's important about the book is the source of shame, because we leave where we come from because it carries the top notes of shame that don't really burn off, you know.
Do you think that coming back, I mean, obviously the divorce and Trump and coming back, they're all intertwined, but where did the decision to be celibate for a while come into all
Well,
of that?
Look, the writer in me thought that a presidential term...
Yeah, great book.
The presidential term of abstinence was just a really great period of time. Looking at Trump's face didn't make me want to have sex with anyone. So I thought, I'm just going to wait till he's gone. But, you know, since the moment I was sexually active, I've lived my life guided by romantic obsession. And Elizabeth Taylor once explained that the reason she'd never done a nude scene on screen was that once you take your clothes off, there's nothing left to do but put them back on again. So there wasn't anywhere left for me to go except to try none of it. It felt right. And I think I also was quite in my way, as we all ought to be by divorce, you know, pretty scarred by it and freaked out by being around men, full stop. You know, I just didn't even want to go to a dinner party with men there. Yeah.
A certain extent, do you think, was there a conscious or unconscious kind of like rebuilding of, I don't know, how to put it really, the sexual boundaries that you almost had never had?
Yes, 100% yes. Yeah, like I say, I think you get an opportunity sort of every 7 years as a woman to redefine for yourself what you're into. And I think because of the age I am, the good template I had was growing up with Madonna, right? Which meant that I was taught from an early age that you can do whatever you want with whoever you want to do it with. Whereas if I'd grown up under Christina Aguilera, under Britney Spears, the message is really different. It's like you have to appear, I mean, especially now with influencers, you have to appear sexually available to whoever is interested in you. And that's really different messaging. So I had the right template to every so often stop and say, what turns me on? You know, and is what turned me on 5 years ago still what works for me?
Did you know, kind of as a young woman, when you were going through various relationships, if someone had said to you, what do you want?
Yeah.
What do you want in bed? Did you know the answer to that?
No idea, but also not remember, for anyone who doesn't know, because I write about it in the first memoir, In Your Voice in My Head, I was a chronic self-harmer and a bulimic, which I haven't, I've been free of that for, I think, a good, at least 15 years, if not more, nothing. But I did always think that bulimia is the evil twin of orgasm for women who are pretty effed up about their sexuality, because it is, the unstoppable crashing wave that comes over your body, that leaves your skin all flushed, that makes it all go quiet. And self-harm, cutting, very much was in the same category of, I don't want to feel this feeling, make it go away, which is what great sex should do, is make it go away. So I don't know if I would have recovered from all of that without the stepping stone of getting into what was good for me in bed, what I enjoyed. And I think, to be completely, I was thinking about this, to be completely blunt, you tell me if I'm being too blunt, like I'm a small person, and I always wanted to be with big men because I had gone into the world too early as an adult, and I liked physically feeling like a little person, and probably still do. Like, it's a bummer I know there's short men who wrestle with, the unfairness of the dating iniquity about, male height. For me, it just served a psychological function of I want to feel small in the world.
I was really interested in the context of that, of you also saying about how you were the person you saw in their eyes. So, I think so many people identify.
Yeah, there's that. It's like a really great version of a hangover, where for the 24 hours, 48 hours, if you're lucky, week after you first sleep with them, you see yourself as they do, and you sort of it's like you get to ride the coattails of their positive opinion of you, until, as with this memoir, you can conjure that for yourself until you do have a positive opinion of yourself and don't need the sex to guide you there.
How important do you think the timing was in terms of your age and where you're at in your life? Because, of course, the divorce and splitting with your husband happened, and that triggered all of this. But had the whole thing been 5 years earlier, do you think it would have had the same out? It's such a hypothetical question.
Well, I've thought about it, because obviously, there's two things in play. One is that I had my kid already, so there was no anxiety about needing to meet someone, assuming I wanted to have a child. That wasn't in place, so you can then use sex just for pleasure rather than for where is this relationship going. And then I suppose the other thing that came into play that I have been thinking about lately, in the current culture, you understandably read so much or hear so much from middle-aged women or women approaching a certain age who struggle with issues of fertility, with anxiety about fertility. And a peculiarity I've just understood recently is fertility is most likely inherited. So my mum had us in her 40s, and I am 45, and I know, because I've been and checked this year, I remain like weirdly fertile. So that is its own strangeness, because I know that 12 months from now that won't be the case. Like, there's going to be a steep drop off. Of course there's going to be. This time next year it won't be the same story, but for now, if I wanted to have a kid, I could. And again, to continue to use sex for the pleasure of sex rather than have that in your head feels... Sometimes I feel like I'm being ungrateful, like you're letting this wither on the vine. You're using sex just for sex at a time when many women your age would, be over the moon to be able to try again. Yeah. So that's something I've thought about.
Did your mum have a later menopause?
I haven't asked her that, actually. I guess I should. I don't know. I know she was kind of a pioneer amongst the kids that I knew in having children late, and I know that she says she felt out of step and a lot older than the other mums at school, and like she's like, I don't want to play tennis with people, and I don't want to, like, she was just like, I'm tired. So
I guess you were born in the 70s, weren't you?
Yeah,
so
it was unusual.
That was Yeah, well, like it was unusual for people to have divorced parents as well.
My parents are together.
Point.
My parents are still together, which is the other thing that confused me is, you know, they're still together despite both being like quite crazy in their own way, but their neuroses fit together really well. So I think I always thought, oh, I'm pretty weird, I should look for another really weird person. But I just never had the right jigsaw fit, you know, of weirdness so far.
Yeah, just yet. Your mum was a bit freaked out by your decision to stay partnerless, wasn't she?
Yeah, and I hadn't realised that. I felt so good about those almost 5 years of celibacy that it never crossed my mind until she told me one day when we were alone on a beach during a lockdown. She just said really quietly, we were looking out at the ocean, and she said really quietly, do you really not want a partner? And it hit me for the first time that she was scared for me. And that made me feel really sad and really guilty.
What do you think she was scared about?
You know, just not having someone to look after you if and when your health fails as you age, you know. With my kid being a single parent, all of that. So I felt guilty that I had been so enjoying all those years alone that just hadn't crossed my mind.
I guess it's that difference though, isn't it, between loneliness and aloneness?
Solitude, you know, solitude.
Yeah,
but I've always been like that. It's like, I don't know. My kid also likes solitude. And there's so many times at the weekend as a single parent when I'll know other mums who are brilliant at like, we're going to the playground and we're doing this and that. And there's a lot of time at the weekend when, you know, she's in the corner building Lego and I'm reading The New Yorker. And we're not engaging with each other and we love each other. But I guess I've got a pretty good match as a child because she enjoys solitude too.
It's a weird thing, though. I think people are very disquieted by women who make a choice to be alone.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't know about you, and I know your situation was a bit different, but like a friend of mine who left her husband a few years ago, nobody would believe that she wasn't leaving him for someone else. Because they just couldn't imagine why you would do that. And she's like, well, I'm leaving him for myself.
Well, yeah, do you know what? I completely relate to that because the truth is, I remember there was a weekend when I wasn't telling my parents my dating life and the fact that there wasn't any. And I wanted to go away to Copenhagen for a long weekend and have them watch my kid. And an instinctive white lie was that I wanted to go away with someone and I wasn't ready to talk about them yet. But that's what I wanted to do. And I felt like that would be easier for them to understand and feel good about me leaving my child for a long weekend. I don't know how it would have been if I told the truth, but I know that I instinctively told that white lie. So
interesting, isn't it? Because it's like, in a way, it's not taking something for yourself.
Yeah.
So weird. I mean, it's not, I get it, totally, but it's so weird the way I think that we do that and the way that so many people do that. It is a thing that comes up again and again when people talking about partners and leaving partners and being alone, and kind of sense of you're not being allowed to be alone, regardless of whether your kids are 5 or 15 or even 25.
Yeah.
And it makes other people feel better.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely thought I wanted my kid to go to a state school. She goes to a state school and it surprises me. It's just peculiar. It's worked out this way that I am the only single parent in class. That really surprised me. We just got unlucky. Not that the other parents aren't extremely welcoming and friendly, they are, but I am aware that she's aware of the stuff that the other kids do with both parents, you know.
When you decided to go back to having sex, presumably went once Trump had buggered off, reluctantly.
Yeah.
How hard was it not to fall back into the old patterns?
I think I did fall back into the old patterns, but I at least could see them for the first time. Like I could really see them and go, oh, well, this is a first step to recognise it. I'm not completely sure how to rewire it yet, but there it is. You know, and things I recognise, like I had all that time, just me and my kid, where I put away all boxes and boxes of clothes. and realised so many of the outfits I bought had been constructed around romantic and sexual fantasy. Like, if I wear this, he will. And when this falls from my shoulder, when this spaghetti strap falls from my shoulder, this heel is going to look, like this in the restaurant, and just putting it all away and just wearing, utilitarian clothes during a lockdown. That was the first thing I identified, was the direct connection for me between spending on wardrobe and romantic obsession. So the amount of money I saved through celibacy and through not constructing these sexual fantasies that often revolved around clothes was huge.
What was the defining thing? Was it the celibacy? Was it, I don't want to say age, but that kind of point in your life that you were at? Or do you think, how much part did lockdown play in that?
Well, lockdown was, I'm loath to say this because I know how painful it was for so many people, but because I'm a writer, I'd always been at home alone anyway, and that's my preference. It's not that I'm shy, it's that I do enjoy my own company, and I like being with my friends one-on-one, or at a push one-on-two. I'm not a drinker, I've never been a drinker. Bars are quite stressful for me. Even dinner parties at a push are I find quite difficult. So just having my own company was the norm, or even pleasant for me. But it did feel like a magic spell to be on lockdown, inside of a lockdown, to be, untouched by choice. And remember, you've read the book, so it became addictive. I stopped using tampons and switched to pads because I didn't want anything inside me. That's pretty weird. And it did probably become quite obsessive. And funnily enough, I think a gateway to being able to have sex again for the first time was going oh my God, when I had started using with those period pants, that are just they're good for the environment, they're disgusting because you just bleed into your underwear and then you wash them every time. But I think
So how are they different from ordinary pants? They're just thicker?
Yeah, they've got foam in the... They're disgusting. It's disgusting. They're really, really good for the environment, and they're gross. And I think I tapped into them because they are disgusting, because you would never wear that in front of a sexual partner or a romantic partner, and it was part of my drawbridge is up. So even just switching back from that to tampons was a first micro step towards maybe I'm going to let someone touch me again one day. But I had probably become quite addicted to it.
Yeah. Was it hard to let someone back in after all that self-containment,
well,
if you like?
Yeah, so I say in the book that when I'm sure my ex-husband stayed in the marriage longer than he otherwise would have. I stayed in the marriage longer than I otherwise would have because I was aware that in the time we'd been together, apps now were the norm, whereas that hadn't existed when we met. And I couldn't fathom how you agree to go out with someone you've never smelled before. That's what I couldn't go. I'm very cat-like. I've always grown up with cats. I've always had cats. I've probably inherited some of their peculiarities, and just the idea of not being able to smell someone before you agree to go meet them is really freaky to me. So I was very, very loath to try apps. But when I finally did, and I matched with someone, and I went out with them, and it was fine, and they were nice, and they were smart and pleasant. And I went home crying because I so didn't want to have sex with them. And it was a friend, a girlfriend, who was like, you don't have to. I was like, oh my God, the instant female factory reset of he wants to have sex with me, so guess I'm going to have sex with him. I couldn't believe that after almost 5 years of celibacy, bam, that came back.
Yeah, that just kicked straight back in.
Yeah. So that was a lucky phone call because I was like, oh my God, I don't have to have sex with him. And there was nothing wrong with him. I just didn't want to.
Didn't want to.
And yeah.
Do you think, though, you're 10 years younger than me, but I was thinking when I was reading the book, there is a real sense, I certainly felt like when we were younger, to a certain extent, and this kind of slightly contradicts what you were saying about Madonna, but it didn't feel so much like there was a choice. Whereas a bit like now, I don't know. I mean, kind of back then there was a bit of and maybe it's also kind of where I come from, but that you've made your bed so you lie in it. That.
Do you mean literally where you grew up?
Well, I mean that. I mean, kind of culturally.
Right, okay.
Kind of, yeah. So kind of culturally that you've made your bed so you lie in it. I mean, that whole insidious phrase that did the rounds for about 15, 20 years where people were talking about date rape as opposed to call it what it was.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. And also the kind of, and heterosexuality as well, that all these things this is what it is.
Yeah.
This is how they are. And it does feel to me now, again, from outside, like there's a bit more, feels like there's more choice. But then the flip side of that is there's also Instagram going, do it like this, look like that, whatever.
Yeah. When I look at Instagram, it doesn't look to me like those look, I would say this because I'm older now, but that those girls in their early 20s on Instagram know what the hell they want. To me, it doesn't look like they have more choice. It looks like there's even more people they're meant to look available to. Not just to any man who's interested. What if there's other genders who are interested? What if there's other, it looks much tougher to me.
I mean, I'm interested by the reflection, I think, that you were getting from sexual relationships when you were younger. How did the process of celibacy get rid of that? Or did it get rid of it?
Well, I think, so when sex became great and effective and orgasmic around 27, the truth is a lot of it was what is called trauma bonding, where people who have both experienced trauma that is perhaps complementary attach themselves to each other, and a lot is figured out through sex, whether or not that's right or wrong. It just is. And so, like, the first epic sexual relationship was with someone who had like significant trauma that matched or it far exceeded my own, and a lot of it was played out and tamed in bed. And that was my first experience of that, and it was amazing. Apart from in life, you're still both traumatized people and can't get along. So the next stage post celibacy is how to have great sex that doesn't rely on the intertwining of trauma. And I actually think I've done that now. Yeah.
Was there a lot of therapy involved in that?
I mean, I've been doing therapy since I was a kid, and or have always come back to it. No, I mean, I still do therapy. I don't think that's particularly the reason. I just do think it's not made up. It is true that a woman, as they come into their 40s, is coming into their peak sex drive and their sexual power, and it's a different kind of sex if you're not driving towards a permanent relationship. If you don't need that, like, you can have a permanent relationship, but you don't need it for reasons of procreation. It's just, you're free to come at it from a different angle.
I guess slightly more of I suppose more of the angle that blokes might come at it.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I mean, maybe. That's very possible, I think. Something I was really fascinated by is I certainly operated under the assumption that pornography is damaging for men and for women, and that it can only possibly lead to less satisfying, more abusive sex. But the young men that I've slept with post-celibacy, who are the ones who have been exposed to it, with 24-hour-a-day access, were way more caring and innovative and open in bed than the older men I've been with as a young person. So I think there's some potentially counterintuitive thing about porn that I'm sure there are men who are broken by it and awful and violent and all of that, but I think some of them maybe have done some learning from it, maybe. Like, I'm trying to understand why else, these young guys are so invested in a woman's pleasure.
Because I noticed when I was reading the book, it had mainly been older men.
Yeah.
And post-celibacy.
Yeah, younger.
The men you mentioned were younger.
Do you know
which seemed like a really big change.
It is, but the other template that was set early in my life, and I'm so grateful for it, there's two really key movies that I adore, that I watched, at a really malleable age. I love the Addams Family and Addams Family values, and I absolutely,
oh God, me too.
I love them so much, and I love the film Mermaids with Cher and Winona Ryder.
Yes,
that's one of my all-time favourite films. And so at a young age, I was like, oh, for now I'm Winona Ryder, but one day I'm going to be Cher. And I was I was equally excited about both. And the same with Addams Family. I was like, I'm Wednesday, and one day I'm going to get to be Morticia. And I am.
Who doesn't want to be Morticia?
Right. So now I get to be Morticia. Now I get to be Cher. It was interesting and sexy being Winona. It was kind of great being Wednesday, but I think the fact that I had those iconic women in my malleable little head actually potentially has made becoming a middle-aged woman in positioning myself sexually much easier than it might have been. I'm not lamenting the loss of youth, because I always knew that there's an epic sex symbol on the other side. Is that mental?
No, because I absolutely loved Morticia too. Yeah. But I don't think I've ever met anybody else.
Okay, well, here I am.
Who did. But I totally loved her.
And please, big up for Cher. Come on. Also a goth.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, always big up for Cher.
Yeah.
She has no issues with self-esteem, does she?
No.
Not a one. Yeah. And I think that we're really, no matter how evolved we think we might get, I think we're still uncomfortable with women who are like, yeah, I don't have a self-esteem problem.
Yeah.
I don't have one.
Oh.
You know, I think we find that a bit, because we're meant to.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're meant to have imposter syndrome, and we're meant to feel like we're somehow lucky.
Yeah.
To be where we are. I know you've already cringed when I said you were very successful, very young, but you were, newspaper column at 16.
Yeah.
And so I guess, what does a middle-aged enfant terrible look like?
What does a middle-aged enfant? That's a good question. A more refined version of the young enfant terrible, I think. I just think I'm probably more appealing to be around now, because I was essentially suicidal for a lot of my youth, and that's not pleasant to be around. You know, that's the great tragedy of people who do commit suicide, is if you look in the media at the culture, the tabloids, it's always like, you know, tragic so-and-so, what could have been done? But the thing is, suicides are tragic, and suicidal people are extremely difficult to be around. So those people who aren't interrupted by a song on the radio or a knock at the door, you know, who don't get out of that horrible moment that they're stuck in and they see it through. There were people around who just found them really difficult, because they are, you know, and I think it's sort of the great stroke of luck of my life that I lived long enough to grow out of it, which I think happens for a lot of people. You know, if you can stay alive long enough, you can get to the other side. And part of staying alive long enough is being given the right medication, having the right therapist. And I was really lucky. And I know, I understand the frustration when Prince Harry talks about mental health. And it's like, mate, you know, there's a 2-year waiting list to see an NHS therapist who's going to give you 2 sessions or whatever. You know, it's...
Yeah, 6 tops, and then you can push off.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer to that. I know I was incredibly lucky, but I do know to my bones that if you can stay alive long enough, you can recover from it.
Do you think that kind of knowledge has superpowered you into middle age?
Yeah, but I only have the knowledge now. You know, I didn't have the knowledge while it was happening. I just got lucky and had the amazing shrink and the amazing family support system, you know, the loving, too high self-esteem parents and the sister who was always able in an incredibly loving way to help me laugh at it. This is in my first memoir, but when I was sectioned and sent to a mental hospital, and everyone was like, oh my God, you know, what's going to become of Emma and the tragedy of Emma, my sister made me her own version of a Hallmark poem card, and she had written, "You're such a lovely person, so sweet and kind and gentle. So I was sad to have to hear that you are going mental." And it really, really helped. And that's who she's been in my life, you know, beyond loving her because she's my sister. Just like when you are plagued with self-doubt, you need someone to be like, shut the fuck up. Just one person.
Yeah.
Just one.
Yeah, just the one. Yeah. Not all the people who don't know you.
Yeah, so she's been a massive...
And have opinions about it.
Yeah. That's exciting to be middle-aged together, actually, because she's just, I think, 2 or 3 years younger than me. So that's pretty thrilling to be middle-aged sisters.
What does middle-age look like for you now?
Well, I laugh and feel resentful and then laugh again about all the public figures, the female icons who, in any list of see how wonderful you could look if women actually let themselves age gracefully and with dignity. I know the doctor that all of those women go to. I know who injects them because when I lived in LA, I went to him once a year too. He would come to Los Angeles from New York for the Oscars, and he's a genius. And so I do wonder, like, if my face were my face without once a year Botox, I don't know. I don't know what's under there. You know, that I'm sort of curious, but not curious enough to do it. You know, it'd be nice if more women were honest about that. If more public fit, like, it's even worse than the starlet who's like, what did I eat to prepare for this? A burger. It's like, no. Just stop. It's not fair. And it's actually something, you know, when we were talking about porn and sort of being surprised by the possibility that maybe it hasn't destroyed a generation of all men, is that the female porn stars I follow on Instagram, one of the things I'm fascinated by is they're the only public women who, the injections, the injectables, the Botox, the filler, it's aspirational. Like, they're not only completely honest, they're like, you know, I'm shooting tomorrow. Today I went and got Botox here, here, and here. They're the only ones I follow who are public figures who are completely open about it, because I guess once you're that at ease with your most intimate parts, why are you going to lie about having... So that would be really nice if mainstream, iconic, middle-aged women could just stop lying.
Do what you want to do, but don't pretend you haven't.
Yeah, either is fine, you know, but they're different. And to me, it's akin to, I don't know, when people who are getting to the age where they would have to decide, are they going to have children or not, to ask me about it, I'm like, I absolutely love my kid because she's my kid and she's amazing. But it's not better or worse than not having a kid, and it's not more or less lonely. It's different, you know? And that's kind of how I feel about my my face as well. You know, that would be my... I would really appreciate it if women would stop lying about that. It's not fair.
Yeah, before I ask you the questions that I always ask, tell me about grandma energy.
That's an interior decor issue where it's true. I am very much beholden to like a dusky floral print in autumnal colours. I'm Capricorn, so I like earth tones. And when I lived just me and my kid, full-fledged grandma decor. I am my own grandma, yeah.
Do you know what? It's so interesting. Number of people I speak to who have separated or started to live on their own again after a long time. And one of the things they love the most is just being able to do what the hell they want with their interiors.
Yep. Yeah, oh my God, I sourced medieval reproduction, unicorn and griffin tapestry wallpaper from Thailand from my office. You know, like...
Is that one wall or that whole...
It became a feature wall, yeah.
You said that might be full on unless you've got very high ceilings.
Yeah, but that was like not grandma energy, that was like ancestral energy.
Yeah, that's not grandma, that's just different. Yeah. It's just not mid-century.
No, it was sort of 15th century. Thank you.
All right, questions I always ask. What's your emotional age? I feel like we've talked about this a lot already.
What's my emotional age? I think I'm exactly the age I am. I mean, I feel girlish, but the reason I wouldn't answer 20s is because my 20s were pretty miserable. So girlish doesn't feel right. So I think I'm the age I am. Yeah.
I mean, I say every week, I'm completely fascinated by this question and the answers, because I think one of the things that comes through again and again and so consistently is that women in their like 40s and upwards, well, it's literally up to 90, feel younger than they have for a long time, but would never go back.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that cliches are cliches for a reason, you know, it's accurate.
Give us a book recommendation.
Ooh, I love, this is a funny one, Acts of Desperation by Megan Nolan, which is a novel about coercive control that sort of feels like a really smart horror movie. Feels like a Rosemary's Baby. And she is a brilliant young writer. That's the funny thing, is that I think she's either late 20s or early 30s, and it's very much sort of millennial horror. But I see that girl, I recognise that girl, I want to reach in and rescue that girl. Yeah, it's a brilliant novel.
On that note, what advice would you give younger women?
What advice would I give younger women? Oh, well, I can be a complete killjoy and say I think I've benefited physically and mentally from not having been a drinker, and that coming back to England from 2 decades in America, the cultural celebration of British drunkenness disturbs me. You know, it's a rite of passage. I'm like, that's not healthy. That's not healthy. So I would say you can drink less, you know, you don't have to bond through drinking. I hate that it's wine o'clock, you know, rosé all day and mummy's drunk because blah, blah. That all makes me sad. But I probably am just a killjoy.
No, I think it's really true. And there's a sense that, I mean, until I got COVID, was quite a big drinker. And, it's actually really quite hard to not drink. In England?
Yeah, I think so too. So I'm glad those decades were in the US, which just doesn't have the same... It's a choice, it's an option, it's fine, and it's done generally in moderation, but there isn't the same glamorization of it.
Yeah, the kind of weekend blowout every weekend. Yeah. Who's your old bird role model?
Oh, easy peasy. She's not old. She's older than me, Nana Cherry, who I recently found out, I think her name potentially is pronounced Nana Cherry. Someone told me this, but I'm going to go with what I always called her, Nana Cherry, who I adored when I was 11 when Raw Like Sushi came out. And I think there was a subliminal impact to seeing a woman who was heavily pregnant on Top of the Pops, and then in her incredibly... sexy music video was actually holding her baby in her arms while she rapped and danced, had a turban in her hair because her hair was wet from drying. So this blueprint for a woman's own version of what domestic life can look like, I think was huge for me, and she still seems pretty solid and amazing to me.
She's very cool.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for
so cool.
the Nana in my DNA.
You've reeled off so many older, cool women, though, during the course of this conversation, like who actually haven't come up before, like Cher and Angelica Houston and, you know, Debbie Harry.
Yeah.
So many. What's your superpower?
My superpower is impulsivity, because everyone's greatest gift is also their greatest fault, you know, always. And impulsivity's gotten me into the most trouble, and it's gotten me the greatest success and joy and freedom and sex and all the good things. So yeah, that's an easy answer for me.
What's the most impulsive thing you've ever done?
I mean, I have a bunch of tattoos that I didn't even really care what they were. I just wanted them. So that's probably not super smart. But I directed a film a couple of years ago called Untogether that starred Jamie Dornan and Jemima Kirk. And the thing is, with directing, you have to go into it knowing that it's your job to make quick decisions, accepting that they may be the wrong decision. So that was a massive gift for me to get to do that. Even if I never get to do it again, that was huge. Yeah.
And lastly, how many fucks do you give?
I think 7. Yeah, I give some. I totally give some. Yeah.
7?
Yeah.
Why 7?
Because it's both too many to give, but probably a lucky number. So again, our greatest downfall is also our freedom. I give fucks, but that's not the end of the world.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Emma. Thanks so much.
Thank you for asking me to do it. And yeah.
Oh no, not at all. And I absolutely loved the book.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. You can hear a new episode of The Shift each Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, please do rate, review and follow, because it really does help other people find us. And if you'd like to support The Shift further, please consider becoming a member of our community. Find out more at steady.media/The Shift.